Hello, ni hao. Welcome to Mandarin Mama Chit Chat by Mandarin Together, where two Taiwanese moms, Trista and Yao Yao, share their experiences in raising bilingual children, exploring identity, code switching, and embracing the joys and challenges of bilingual parenting. Come along with us on this exciting journey.
Hey guys, I want to let you know we have a Mandarin mini number course that is out. Make sure you go check it out in our link bio. I will link it in show notes. In this mini course, you'll learn how to say 1 to 99 in Mandarin Chinese in just 12 minutes. It includes a video training. We will teach you how to write 1 to 10 in Mandarin character, how to calculate your lucky numbers, and you will learn all the unlucky numbers and lucky number in Chinese culture. We also include in this mini course a lot of activity sheets, coloring sheets for the kids to work on to make it fun. So make sure you go check it out. And as always, we also have lots of freebie for you to download. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you'll get the latest updates. Hi everyone, this is Yao Yao. Welcome back to Mandarin Mama Chit Chat. I practice gratitude every day, and I'm feeling extra grateful today. How lucky I am that I get to talk to so many amazing women, mother, because of this podcast. I have the pleasure and opportunity to interview so many amazing moms. We are all so different. We came from different backgrounds, different upbringing, different ethnicity, and we all have different story to tell. But I feel like we are all the same, so much similarity at the same time. We all have so much love for our children, and the things we're willing to do to sacrifice for our children is just unbelievable. And I get to connect with all these women and all these moms, listen to their perspective, their stories, their sacrifices for their children. It's just such a blessing for me. Well, enough rambling. Today, I want to introduce Emma. Emma, she's Caucasian and she's from Australia. She adopted 3 Chinese children. Both she and her husband decided to move to Singapore to immerse their children in a Mandarin-speaking country. I promise you're going to be so inspired by this episode. We talk a lot about school system in Singapore, and how Singapore promotes and celebrates different culture in different colors. If America is a melting pot, I would say Singapore can be like a salad bowl. They actively promote racial harmony and celebrate different country in their holidays. I was so impressed by what Emma said to me, and I didn't know that about Singapore. I was just so impressed. I was like, I think we all need to move there. We all need to raise a global citizenship, right? Let's welcome Emma. Hi, Emma. Welcome. I'm so excited to meet you.
Likewise. Hi, Trista. Hi, Yao Yao.
Okay,
Did I
so
say your name
today,
correctly?
yes, Yao Yao. Good job. Okay, so we have Emma here today. Emma, she's a mom of 3. She's Caucasian, but she's raising her kids in Mandarin, bilingual. And I love your feeds that you're always teaching your kids like through different play, like crafts and fun stuff. So let's start telling us about your background. Emma, I think you're from Australia.
I am. Yeah, I grew up in Australia. And in Australia, languages are not really something that's taught in schools, at least. So I don't speak any other languages. I learned like half a year of Italian, half a year of Chinese, in fact, when I was about 7, half a year of Latin, half a year of German, half a year of lots of things, which wasn't very helpful. When I became a mom, my children are actually ethnically Chinese. So it was important for me and my husband to raise them knowing something of the culture that they're from. And my husband also doesn't speak any Chinese. Australia wasn't really, we thought at the time, wasn't a great place to teach them Chinese. And we've been in Singapore, which is a Chinese-speaking country. And we've been raising the kids here since then.
Okay, you have to tell us, how did you move from Australia to Singapore?
Well, our stuff moved on a ship and we went on a plane and we landed in Singapore. Singapore is, as long as you've got a job, Singapore's a pretty open international place to live. And I think when we moved here, we realized we were moving here because we thought that there would be a very good, strong Mandarin-speaking culture to raise our kids in. But it's so international that we actually have to make quite an effort to get connected with the Chinese community here, or at least speaking English, speaking Chinese rather than English here. But all the resources are here. So we once you make the connections and you work out the section in the library where the Chinese is, which part of Chinatown you can go to practice Chinese rather than looking like a tourist. We kind of it's been a slow process, but after a decade, I think we've pretty much nailed how to learn Chinese in Singapore.
Okay, so you didn't move there for your job or your husband's job. You just, like, you and your husband just want to move out of Australia because of your 3 kids. You want to raise them in a Mandarin environment. Is that why you moved?
That was the main reason. But I have to say, Singapore, you need a job to live in Singapore. As with most places in the world, we weren't born with the luxury of just never working. So my husband does work in Singapore, as do I.
Okay, do you mind if I ask what you guys do for work?
I'm an engineer, so I build tunnels, underground tunnels. Singapore's got a lot of train lines, so it works quite nicely.
So both of you guys work from home?
No, I work in an office every day.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. That's so nice because so you guys adopted 3 Chinese kids. Is that correct? They are
Yep.
okay. I think that is so special because that what you guys are doing for them, because you don't have to, right? You don't have to teach them Mandarin or raise them in that environment, but that's you choose to. You want them to know the culture and know the language. Because I know I met few adopted kids like my age, but they actually don't know anything. And there's nothing wrong with that. They don't know anything about their background, but now they're older, they're kind of curious. Doesn't matter if you're Korean, Japanese. Like I met this lady, she's ethnically Korean. But she's adopted. She's older now, and she's just curious. Like, what is Korea like? Oh, all the K-pop. Like, she's now want to explore and know where she's from, like her cultural background. So I think it's so amazing what you're doing with your 3 kids because it's a choice and it's amazing.
Definitely a choice. But I think it's a decision that would have been hard not to choose to do this. For the kids, we want them to know about their heritage. We want them if someone, I mean, people look at them and assume that they will speak Chinese, and it's not a nice feeling to have people assume things when inside that's not the case. So we wanted to kind of break all that and have them learning Chinese. And beyond that, I've always wanted my kids from way back before I was a mom. I said I want my kids to learn another language. It's something that I didn't do as a child, and I see these moms in the playground that speak to their kid in their native language, and I think that's really special. And it's a way to build other connections, to break down barriers, to see a different side of a language. Right? You're suddenly jumping outside of. For me, I just speak English, but if I could jump outside and look at English from the outside in, I think I would see the language differently and how beautiful it is as well. So I always wanted a way for whoever I raised to be able to see another perspective on a language. And I guess we're lucky enough that the kids now have a ethnic link back to China. And they're doing it with Chinese, and it's not just Chinese. We're now on the process of learning Spanish as well, which is another language that neither my husband nor I have any connection with. But we just think it's a nice global language for the kids to be learning.
Are you guys learning it with the kids?
It's a good question. I really should have. A decade ago, I should have just started learning. I think I read too many books that said beyond the age of 30 that it's very hard for the brain to connect and learn a new language, which I'm sure is very true. But consistency and little efforts over time can build up to create big results as well. So I think had I started 10 years ago, I know I wouldn't have been fluent, but I believe that I would have learned something. So this is the year that I'm actually going to start learning. as is my husband, we made a promise to the kids. Our youngest just started primary school this year, and she asked us, why we can't speak Chinese. She's the first of all our kids that actually just confronted us and been like, why can't you speak it? And we had no excuses, so we're both starting online classes this year.
Amazing. Several questions. How long have you guys moved to Singapore? And then roughly around what age the kids were? And how does that look like? How do they learn Chinese? How to incorporate Chinese into everyday?
Sure. So all the kids were born in Singapore. So they're not Singaporean, but they were born in Singapore. And so they've known nothing else apart from they're Singaporean essentially. Although they do not have a Singapore passport, which is the only reminder that we get they're not Singaporean. That's a unique quirk of Singapore. So the kids, they go to local school in Singapore where school is taught bilingually, but which I kind of blindly thought I put my kid in school and then they will learn the language and it's done. My job is done. And I kind of did that when my eldest was 3. We put her into a bilingual school, and I was a full-time working mom. She'd go to school kind of early. I'd pick her up kind of late, and there were pictures of what she was learning during the school day, and I assumed she was learning Mandarin. It was kind of 3 years later when I realized actually she's in this bilingual environment, but she's learned very, very little, because learning in a classroom is not that effective. And that's kind of when we turned everything around and we said, actually, we're going to be really active parents, hands-on parents, and teach them the way we want them to learn it and make our house very immersive in language learning, I suppose. So we kind of had a moment of realization that we'd probably hadn't quite been parenting the right way. Yes, parents do make mistakes, and we'd probably made a pretty big one in thinking that a language can be learned in a school. And, maybe math and science can be learned in a school. I don't think things like manners and family values can be learned in a school. And likewise, I think language isn't, because language is relational, and it's how you relate to different people. And so a classroom and a book doesn't really do that. So what did we change? We started at home, firstly, just putting up like pictures all around the house. We got flashcards. I went to the shop and bought a ton of books. I felt really silly going into this Chinese bookstore. I didn't know what I was buying, and I picked up random books and brought them home. And again, that was also pretty silly, because if you have books but no one to read the books, it also doesn't work. So we did a lot of silly things, I would say, in the first 5 years of being new parents. When things actually started to work was when I went online. I did some research about how you can acquire language skills. We watched some very simple YouTube videos together. I took a very basic Chinese course at the community center here, so I kind of learned the tones and how the language goes together, some basic greetings. And then I generally just asked the teacher, like, what else can I do? And that's when this whole world of apps and books, like audiobooks, audio pens, interactive apps was open to us. And we kind of started having them at home. And I guess it just kind of cascaded from there. So I wouldn't say that overnight we went from being fairly hands-off parents to like suddenly like doing craft and stuff like that together. But over, COVID was great, right? Because we're stuck at home. The kids were stuck at home. We were all home learning. There was no one external that was able to teach the children Chinese for basically 2 years during the whole of the Singapore lockdown, the world lockdown of COVID. So then we were kind of stuck with them. We had the school books, and we just got our hands stuck into it at that point.
How old are your kids now?
They are 7, 9, and 11.
7, 9, and okay. So they're all in the elementary school now. I have 11, so almost going to middle school.
Yeah, in Singapore we kind of have a primary school and a secondary school, so they're all in the primary school segment.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what's their level? Okay, let me ask another question. Excuse my ignorance. In Singapore, I know it's very international. People can speak many different languages. What is the majority, like the main language people speak there?
And this is kind of my ignorance as well when we came to Singapore. English is the predominant language of business. And English, you could get away with speaking only English and you'll have zero problems. So English being the main language that's used, but the official languages in Singapore, there are three of them, Tamil, Malay, and Mandarin Chinese. Actually, Mandarin Chinese is, yes, it's the official government language, but there's probably more speakers of Hokkien, some of the dialects, Hakka, more common here. So actually everyone, it's very rare for children to be in a family where the parents speak good Mandarin, because they probably also have learned a first generation kind of Mandarin and then trying to teach it on to the kids. So the general level of Mandarin, I would say across Singapore, it's much better than my Mandarin, which is zero, but it's nothing like what you would find in, say, Malaysia, where most Chinese would speak Mandarin to a very high level, or Taiwan, Hong Kong, where it is a mainstay language. Here, it's taught as a mother tongue in schools, but not taught at such a high level as other countries.
So I am assuming your kids, of course, main language, the first language will be English, and then second will be and second will be Mandarin. Can they converse pretty well?
Yeah, I'm always hesitant to kind of put a level of fluency, because even I think it's how long is a piece of string, right? You can get better and better in a language. My ultimate goal would be that they can read something like Harry Potter or a newspaper in Mandarin. We're definitely not at that stage yet. But in terms of fluency for their age versus the other children that are in their school year level, they're probably slightly better, in the sense that so my kids they cannot learn Mandarin from me or my husband in terms of speaking it. And there's no point us attempting to speak it with them. I'm learning it, sure that I'm interested in it now. And I'm generally interested in it and want them to see my enjoyment of the language, but I can't teach them tones. I can't teach them words. They just run rings around me from just learning, like even a month in a school here, and they'll learn more than I can speak in a year. So what we can do is connect them with the right resources so that they can learn independently by themselves. We've also relied on some online Chinese classes as well to supplement. The school classes in Singapore are large sizes. So you're talking 30, 40 kids in a class, which is also not an effective way to sort of learn a language, to orally learn a language, because you can't have 40 kids speak in a 1 hour or 2 hour class.
Are they taught in the classroom setting? Are they taught like...
Yeah, so they're taught in a classroom setting in Singapore. That's the way it's taught in schools. So it's
like in Mandarin?
No, they have a Mandarin lesson in the day. Like, it's taught as a second language. Most of the day is in English. Math is taught in English. Science is English. And then they have every day about an hour where they learn Chinese in school. So
okay.
When you kind of connect all the dots, is that an effective way to learn a language? No. any not even an expert kind of university paper. You just read the basics of how to pick up a language, and you don't catch a language in a classroom. But that's the way the Singapore system is set up. So essentially you need to learn the language outside of the classroom. If you can't speak it with your parents, which many Singaporeans can't, then you turn to... In Singapore, they will turn to tuition centers, which is way beyond our budget level. So for us, we have online classes, which we had started actually before COVID, just so that I could, if the children brought home like a spelling list from school, that they can practice how to like do the things here with someone who can actually read out the spelling words, and then they can hold up their list to show the character. Because I can't do any of that stuff. Whereas parents in Singapore, they may not be fluent in Mandarin, but they would know enough to be able to go through like the grade 1 spelling list. So when we turn to online tutors, or based in mainland China predominantly, I think that unlocked a level of Mandarin for my kids that actually couldn't be achieved locally in Singapore. So they actually, I mean, people hear them speak and they go, wow, they've got this accent that's not Singaporean. And then I used to think, oh, is that because they sound like Australian? They just sound like they can't speak Mandarin. They're like, no, they speak it beautifully. And it's from, online teachers who are from mainland China. Then we use a lot of audiobooks now, which are, again, recorded from mainland China. We've got a Luca. We use Happy Udao reading pens. All that kind of stuff is great products that are made either out of mainland China or often by passionate mums and entrepreneurs who have come from Taiwan and China and then, moved to the US and made these great products. And they're not really used locally in Singapore, which I think is, in a way, how people in Singapore became interested in what I was doing, because other parents in the class they're ethnically Chinese and they speak a little bit of Chinese would suddenly be like, wow, your kid can speak Chinese and it's not a struggle for them. And then I started kind of sharing the resources that we were using, and they were very different from what most of the other mums were using.
So I have a question. Thank you for sharing all of these. It's very fascinating, and like the fact that you just put so much time and effort in raising your kids bilingual, it's really admirable. But a question in terms of the education system, I think it will help us understand what's the education system like in Singapore. I guess the setup. How many years in primary school? I guess middle school and
Yeah,
beyond, and
sure.
also do they have different type of schools? Because I know at least in Malaysia, they have like for different ethnic groups, they almost have their own school system. I wonder if that's the case in Singapore.
It's not quite the case. If I was recommending to someone who was, had the liberty to choose anywhere in the world to find a school to put their kids into if they wanted them to learn Chinese and could move to that country, I would not be recommending Singapore. I recommend Singapore for many other reasons, but not for the Chinese learning. Malaysia actually does have the Chinese medium schools that take Chinese to almost a level I would say is seen outside of mainland China. So Malaysia has its own discrete schools, but for Singapore, the schools are all very similar, all the local schools. The government has a saying that all schools are great schools. And so they really try to keep the resources similar across all the schools, the subjects, the teachers. They rotate. There's no such thing as private schools. The Singaporean cannot send their children to any other school but a local government school. And so they all run on the same curriculum. So there's no choice of, Montessori or even if you choose to homeschool, which we thought very seriously about. If you choose to homeschool, you must follow the Singapore government curriculum. And you must actually provide, as a homeschooling family, evidence of how you're going to follow that curriculum and sit the same annual exams and mid-year exams, etc. So there's not a lot of flexibility. The way languages are taught is about an hour a day during the school day. And then the school year starts when you're 7. So it starts quite a bit later than 7 years of age. So it starts later than many other Western countries. I think they've framed it off the European model for the view that kids should play quite a lot in the early years rather than being in a formal education system. But then, gosh, when it starts at 7, it's very formal. It's very intense. You have so you don't just have a class that you sit in with the one teacher all day and she teaches you phonics and then maybe some math and then you do some art and craft, or maybe you go for a sport class. It's more like to me, it's like a university kind of timetable where you have a different teacher for every subject. The subjects are taught sort of an hour at a time, and you'll switch classrooms. You're in a group of 30 kids when you first start. So the first 2 year levels, primary 1 and primary 2, is 30 kids. Then primary 4 to primary 6 is 40 kids. And then you just kind of follow this timetable. Or sometimes is math, sometimes is citizenship education, sometimes is social studies. So that's the way it works for primary school. And there are starting from grade 3, there are annual exams, and they stream those kind of cohorts. So whichever it's very clearly done. You're in 3A or you're in the 3G class, and or somewhere in between. And that's based on what you got from your previous exam results. And they stream it by subject. So you could be in 3A class for Chinese, which would be you're the best in Chinese, but you could be in 3C for math.
Have they gone back to Australia? Have you taken them back yet?
Yeah. That's where our family is. That's ultimately where our home is. They've got Australian passports. So yeah, we go back every school holidays. We are back in Australia. That's where their grandparents are. Nothing beats spending time with family. So their cousins are there. Christmas is spent there. Yeah.
They love it. Do they like it?
They do. My eldest is getting to an age now where she's got a lot of friends from school as well. So she is getting torn between, where is home? If we left her to her own devices, would she want to stay in Singapore or Australia? And she's tending towards Singapore now because she feels very settled in Singapore. But she won't give up a holiday to Australia.
Do they ever, especially older one, you have a 9 and 11, I have an 11-year-old, and they're older now, they're more mature. Have they ever asked you or struggled that identity issue, identity crisis?
I think all children probably go through it. What's unique in Singapore is that there is already a very big ethnic blend within the classes or within society. So maybe 60% of Singapore is Chinese, and then probably 20% Malay and another 20% Indian. And then you get kind of a couple of foreigners like me who really do stick out. But for the majority of the kids, there's some kind of mix anyway. There's a lot of emphasis on racial harmony. Singapore, in its formation, had several big racial riots. So the government has very purposefully made the education system, I guess, multiracial in terms of what they study. They have a citizenship and ethics class multiple times a week where they learn about different races, different traditions that are celebrated. We have public holidays in Singapore. We celebrate the Indian public holidays. We celebrate the Muslim public holidays. We celebrate the Chinese public holidays. So the word used in Singapore is rojak, which is Malay for very mixed. So I think kids are ultimately blind to color as well when they're young. They don't see the differences. So it took my kids quite a long time to kind of realize that I had different hair color or different eye color from them. Or they realized it, but they didn't think there was anything wrong with that. And I think it's only when people you get a project at school, draw your family tree, or you're studying science. And my daughter in grade 5 last year was studying what traits, characteristics of traits that are passed down for what is recessive genes, or curls and blonde is recessive, etc. And it's only then that I think they start to go, oh, maybe there is something different. But many kids, whether they're mixed race, whether they're adopted, whether the parents are divorced, everyone has circumstances to kind of question their own. Even just you look different from a twin sister could be a reason to kind of question your identity. So
Wow.
we have. I think Singapore for any mixed race family, Singapore is a great place to be because racial harmony is emphasized, and we have like a racial harmony day every year.
Wow.
Those kids can get dressed up in anything. So quite funny, one of my daughters 2 years ago kind of got in trouble because she wore what I would call like a party dress. It's kind of like a smock dress with some polka dots, and to her she was like, that's Australian fashion. So she wore that to school when everyone else was wearing like cheongsams and like Indian ethnic dress, etc. And she wore this, and the teacher told her, no, it's not wear a pretty dress day. It's actually like get dressed up in ethnic clothing day. She said, oh, but that's my mom's ethnic clothes.
Oh my gosh, what you share, I am just so amazed. This is the first time I didn't know that. And I think we need that. Trista, we need that in the US, the ethnic like harmony day and all that. I love that. Because it's so different here in US. You would say that, right, Trista? So different. Because we grew up in Taiwan. I moved here when I was 14, and Tristan and I talked about we struggle, like the identity issue. Like when we go back, we don't feel like we really fit in because we've been gone for so long. But then we're here in the United States. It's quite, we look different, right? And for me, I speak differently, and it's different. And so I struggle too, like that identity issue. And then I can imagine people kids growing up here in the United States. Like my kids, they struggle with that identity. And I would say Trista too, right? Your kids mix half and half, I'm sure. But they're still young. Maybe when they're growing up, they will kind of ask that question too. But I love that culture in Singapore.
The US has a lot of racial issues that I can't even start to put my head around. Firstly, because I'm from Australia and they have different racial issues in Australia. And I don't think that kind of, maybe the hatred that many in America would feel from being kind of non-white doesn't exist so much in Australia. And then I've now spent more than the last decade living in Singapore, which is just such a beautiful rojak mix of races, and they deliberately keep it very harmonious. I mean, even to the extent the blocks, we have housing blocks that you live in Singapore. Most of 80-90% of Singapore live in government housing, which you rent from the government. And they have these quotas, right? A certain amount of the block can be Chinese, a certain amount can be like, we're in the other category, which is great because there are not many others. So we can basically choose whichever block we want to live in. But they have these quotas, so you cannot get like an ethnic enclave. You can't get a little Chinatown kind of coming up in the heartlands of Singapore because you have to have Muslim neighbors and Indians in there. So yeah, it's a very harmonious country from that respect.
I love that. I love that. That's amazing. It's more like a global citizenship kind of feeling. Like, I don't know, like if we go, I live in Houston, we do have a lot of Asian, but if let's say we travel outside of Houston, as a family, we all Taiwanese, so we all look Asian. If we go to like all white place, I don't know, restaurant or mall, maybe, I don't know if just us, we feel people look at us differently. Okay, just be honest, right?
Yeah.
So, but this is the US, and I just love everything what they're doing there in Singapore. I wish we can adopt that a little bit here, but it's gonna be hard. Is that why? Because I'm curious, when I was inviting you on to the podcast, you were saying that some blogger was not happy because they thought you are Chinese because your kids are Chinese. And is that why?
I mean, I guess online you can't tell where someone is from. I have unfortunately had situations where I wouldn't just say some blogger, but a couple of different people online have assumed that because I blog about Chinese that I must speak Chinese, therefore I am Chinese, which I'm not. And then they realize that I'm not, and then they're like, "Oh, but she's stealing our culture," and or you're just trying to be this white person that's putting across an image that you speak Chinese. I don't speak any Chinese. I've made that abundantly clear. But I think you can build bridges through languages. So I want my kids, like, I feel so sad when I hear stories of what you guys say about how it feels to grow up in the US and to be looked at differently, or to think that your kids might be bullied or questioning who they are, more so than other children are, just because of what they look like, or maybe the way their parents speak. That makes me really sad. So I do not want my own kids to go through that type of thing, which is kind of a reason driving some of this passion.
Well, now everybody, all the listeners know, if you
I am definitely not Chinese.
You can move to Singapore if you want that harmony, without no racial issues. Let's all move to Singapore.
Yeah, and I think I sometimes I miss a lot of the context when people talk about these awful dramas and violence that happens in the US, and I'm very glad not to be part of it.
Now, the bloggers, I'm just curious, are they from the United States?
I think most of the well-known bloggers are from the United States, but I'm not saying that this bloggers.
No, I
well
said
known
the
that
one
get
who,
angry at me, but
the one who approached you.
many bloggers have approached me.
But the one that, what did you say? They say you're stealing our culture. That was so interesting. That was interesting because to me, I think this story, it makes you unique. Like, what are you doing? You're going out of your way and putting so much effort for your kids because it's a big life decision, moving out of your hometown country because you want to raise your kids in different environment for them to be bilingual. That's a really admirable and inspiration. It takes a lot of courage. And that makes your story so unique. And that never crossed my mind of stealing culture thing. I think we should learn all type of culture.
I think you're right, but I do also I see where she's saying that there have been instances of someone who's maybe trying to profit out of the language, or rewrite a book about how to learn Mandarin the right way or something, written by a white person. And so, and again, I don't know the whole context in the US, so people don't usually get angry unless there's a kind of a valid personal reason to feel hatred. So I'm sure she has a good reason behind it. And I hope I would never want to be that reason.
Yeah, that's actually really surprising to me. Yeah, for me, it's like learning is learning. We were actually promoting Chinese culture and the language, and what you're doing is really inspiring. But I think I will have to look into it. Like you said, I don't know the entire context either. But sorry, you had to go through that.
I don't know the context.
So I guess I have another question. So when your kids travel back to Australia, right? Or because seems like Singapore education is preparing them pretty well to be versed or navigate among different cultures. But when they go to Australia, obviously Australian culture is very different from Singaporean culture, right? From what they're familiar with. Have there been any, I guess, questions, or I don't want to say culture shock, but just like curiosity or things they weren't used to, and you have to like, oh, this is, I guess, the Australian way, or this is like the norm that we do in Australian culture. Has there been instances like that you could share with us?
I guess we had an interesting so in Australia there's our last trip we went to a town which is now like a historical mining village. So they've done it up like where you can go see where the old gold miners live, learn about the gold rush, how a lot of foreign settlers came to Australia. So we're going in this town, and there's road work, and the guy who's doing the road work, he's holding that, like, we call them lollipop men. I don't know what you call them, like the stop go sign. So he's got the stop sign up. He's got his hard hat on, like we can't go because they're doing some construction on the road. And it was a few minutes, so he had quite enough time to kind of peer into the car and have a good look at who was in the car. So it's actually me and my dad was driving, and this guy's kind of looking in the car. He's got his sunglasses on. He actually was wearing a mask. I think COVID was getting quite high, and he's peering in the back of the car at the kids. And my dad and I felt a little nervous. Like, what's he can see something's different. Like he's trying to compute something. What is going on? And then he said something to the kids in the back. He went, "You're halfies," which I had not heard someone use that before, and definitely hadn't heard someone use it kind of affectionately. We didn't think he was using it very affectionately. So I was kind of like, oh, we're still stuck behind this. I wish they'd just pour the tar and let us move on, because now we've got this weird guy kind of staring in the back of the car, calling my kids halfies. And then the kids are like, "What's a halfie?" And then it's like, we don't really need to go into this right now. And he pulls his sunglasses off, and he goes, "I'm an original halfie." And he was actually, there was enough time that he started talking after that, but he was a son of a kind of a Chinese immigrant that had come to this town for the gold rush 100 years, or he was his ancestors had come. And so now he was mixed race, Chinese and Caucasian of some kind. So he was actually really excited that in the back of the car, that he thought he found some halfie kids. I think that's probably the funniest interaction that we've had. And then we had to explain to the kids exactly what a harpy was, and then tell them, please, like, if you're writing a story about this, please don't use the word harpy back back in Singapore when you're talking about your school holidays, please.
Out of curiosity, though, so obviously you and your husband from Australia, so you speak Australian English. But with the kids living in Singapore and with the Singlish, I'm more curious in their English. How is like a nice blend, or is like how is their English? Like vocabulary.
This is when I have to be honest. I don't think Singaporeans speak great Chinese nor great English. It's a very effective way of communicating. If you have to type a text message, the Singlish words get you there very fast. Less characters, conversation goes faster. But in terms of expressing emotions, expressing feelings, being eloquent, I think the Chinese and the English are on a similar par of not world class. So the spoken English, yes, there's a strong Singlish accent that many Singaporeans will have. My kids, because we don't speak with a Singlish accent, don't speak it to me. But kids are so clever. If they're in the playground with their school friends, they will code switch, and yeah, they'll just sound like a Singaporean kid. And they do the same with their Chinese, we've realized as well. It's taken us, I mean, I can't hear it, but other people now comment that whilst their Chinese is quite beautiful, when they just talk to them one-on-one, when they're in the playground talking with their kids, talking with their friends, that these parents can hear that my kids' Chinese is the same as their friends. So kids are so adaptable. Their brains are like little sponges that soak it all in. Which is a great reason to, speak proper English, use proper grammar, teach kids as many languages as you can when they're little, because they'll just get it.
Like a sponge. Yep.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Even with English or like Chinese, right? They can switch back and forth depending on who they're with. That's really fascinating.
It was something that I was actually worried about, in terms of, not that I think there's anything wrong with having a Singaporean accent, but if, again, you don't want to be the one that stands out. And the reason that we're in Singapore and that we're focusing a lot on Chinese is so that they can connect with their Asian heritage, but then they won't be singled out for being the Chinese person that doesn't speak Chinese, which I know is actually quite normal in Australia and the US. Many kids will not speak a word of language that maybe their grandparents speak. I also don't want them to be the kids. Eventually, I imagine they'll go back to Australia for university, and I don't want them to be like the Australian kids in university that don't know anything of Australia and don't sound like Australians as well. So everyone kind of wants to blend in, right?
For sure.
I also want to ask, have you ever taken the kids, because Singapore, I mean, Asia, everywhere, every other country is very close to each other. Have you guys traveled anywhere else besides go back to Australia? Has kids come to like China? And you say you've been to Taiwan.
Yeah, I would like to travel more. I guess because we are working parents, our holidays are limited, and the kids are now all in school. And for Singapore schools, they're pretty strict. You can't just take a kid out of school and decide you're going on a month road trip, like a world learning tour or something. It doesn't really work like that. So we're limited by the holidays. And then we try to get as much time. Both sets of grandparents of the kids are in Australia. So we want as much time with them as we can. So we haven't traveled as much around the region as we would have liked to. There's still plenty of time for that, I think. We've been to Taiwan. Obviously, that's another Chinese-speaking country, much more so than Singapore. So you can't really get by around Taiwan without speaking Chinese. So it's a good place to take children that are learning Chinese, because then they can see the instant value in it. Whereas in Singapore, you can kind of constrain Chinese to be a language in the classroom that you don't use elsewhere.
Yes. I take my kids back every summer. My family's over there, and that's when when we go back, we stay at least for a month or two for summer break, of course. And you'll see, even in short period of time, their Mandarin improve like so fast, because they're speaking with the grandmothers, speaking with the great grandmothers, speaking with the auntie and uncle family. They have no choice, no way out of it, because nobody in my family really speak English, zero English. and going to little shops, night market. They need to converse. They want something. They need to speak Mandarin.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that you don't need to do in Singapore. So that's why Taiwan, I think, is a great place to travel for learning Mandarin. We haven't been to China yet. It's kind of maybe mid-year this year. We're looking at going to Nanjing again to just so that the kids can see Chinese really in action.
Oh yeah, that will be fun. I actually never been to China personally, but definitely want to travel. You will see a lot of history in China.
So, as thank you for joining us. Like, you provide so many like great resources, information, and just sharing your journey with us. And it's just really amazing how determined and how persistent you and your husband are. But could you now share with us like about your blog? Because you have the La La Banana, right? That's your blog name. Could you just kind of share with us and the audience a little bit about your blog, what it's about, where we can find you, and things like that?
Sure. I have the blog is called Lala Banana, which my husband chose the name for it. And he uses the word banana affectionately with our kids. It's used in Singapore as a common term to describe kids that look Chinese, but on the inside are very white. And it's very common in Singapore.
We say that too here in United States, right? We say banana, 香蕉.
In the US, maybe calling people banana is more of an offensive, can be an offensive term. So it's one of those kind of cultural, like I've gotten in trouble for my blog name before. If I was rethinking, I probably wouldn't have called it Lala Banana. But anyway, anyone who's annoyed by the blog name, you don't have to go there. It's okay. I'm not trying to offend anyone. And my kids are quite happy to call themselves bananas as well. And they're proud of the fact that they do have a white inside of them. Inside of them looks a little bit like me as well.
I want to comment because I just feel like it's the cultural difference, right? I think in the US, and sorry if you're not happy of me saying that, but I do feel living in the US, people get offended way too easily. Little thing, and they just get offended, and it's okay. I think my daughter came back, I think last month, said, "Hey, mommy, my friends say I'm a banana." I was like, "Do you know what that means?" She's like, "Yeah, it means like I'm white inside, but outside I'm yellow." I say, "Yeah." And then I didn't make a big deal out of it, and it's okay. But I do think, here in the US, then the culture is different, and people do get offended more easily. So we just, I guess, even for me, I just sometimes have to really think about what I say. I don't want to offend anyone, but if I do, then I guess so be it, because sometimes it's really hard to please everyone, right? It's hard to please everyone.
Yeah. So anyway, bananas are my favorite fruit, and la is a very common word associated with Singapore. So Lala Banana is the blog that I have. The blog actually started because when I started doing a few different things with my kids for Chinese, and I guess moms in Singapore, they use this word kiasu, which is like a fear of missing out on something. They're very kiasu, and everyone, I guess, is always comparing against other kids, and they notice when your child goes from like really not getting Chinese and being the very blur one to suddenly just like loving it and speaking it and jumping like leaps ahead of others. Kind of people like, which tutor did you get for your child? Like, how did this happen? And then I would start sharing the links. I'd be like, look, I go to this section of the library, you can borrow this book. Go to this blog, this person's great, watch this video. So it started off from not a blog, but I had like just a shared list. It started an email actually that I shared with the kindergarten friends, moms, and then sort of people stopped emailing and everyone started using WhatsApp, and sharing long lists like that on WhatsApp is really kind of annoying to read on the phone. Then it became a Google document. And then from a Google document, people started asking for like, can they have permission to share it with someone else? And then I realized like I can't. At first I was like, yeah, you can share it. And then I was like, no, hang on, but I've got like other quite personal stuff in this Google Drive. So I don't want all that stuff shared. And it just ultimately became a blog, which is great because I can now. I don't have a great memory. I think maybe memories with mums get worse with every child they have. So for my third child, and I'm kind of like, oh, okay, now she's 6. What was I doing when my eldest was 6? and I often just go to my blog. And so I'll search for that year, and then I'll find, or I'll be like, there's an author or a name of a book that I really like, but I just cannot for the life of me remember what it was, but it's on my blog. So I use the blog a lot for myself as well. And it's mainly a friends and family. I was very hesitant to go on. So it was a blog without Instagram, without Facebook. I am a bit of a dinosaur like that. I'm not a fan of technology. The reason I went on Instagram was a couple of years back, a very kind bookstore in Singapore said to me that they would like to share some books, but they wanted me to be able to put some posts up so that they could link to them and share what I was writing, and doing it through the blog wasn't quite enough for them. And that's when I kind of launched onto Instagram. Sometimes I'm on it a lot, other times I don't use it for months. I'm not a huge social media fan, but then like what you ladies are doing, there is some great stuff there. So as long as you kind of don't go down that rabbit hole of just wasting a lot of like aimlessly just flicking and swiping left and getting caught in a trap, which I kind of tend to do. I think there's some great stuff, and I've met great people over social media as well. It makes the world much smaller, and I've been able to connect with other mums. So all in all, I'm very glad to have put up my blog, to have gone on Instagram, just for the connections that I've made through it. And those connections help the kids back again, right? So you meet another mom, she's doing something interesting, and it just, the whole thing just kind of magnifies itself.
Oh yeah, there's definitely pros and cons in social media. I mean, the pro is like without Instagram, I wouldn't have met you and know your interesting, loving story. So please keep sharing. I'm just so very inspired on what you're doing, and I want you to keep sharing your story and promote the Chinese and Asian culture. I love that. And I'm going to link your information show notes so people can easily find you. Is there any last word, like last of encouragement you want to share to the listeners? Maybe parents are going through learning Mandarin with their kids, the bilingualism, anything you want to share?
I think you have to make the language fun. We definitely saw the shift in the kids between us being connected to it, or us not caring, and then us caring about it. Suddenly the kids start to care, right? It's kind of the same as what your boss says at work. Like, things that matter to me, it should be what matters to my boss. And I'm sure the kids are like, oh, if you think Chinese doesn't matter, then it doesn't matter. But on the flip side, if you're so intensely focused on learning Chinese that the kids then aren't interested in it, it's also bad. So there's kind of a middle ground, and I don't think there's a right or a wrong way. There's probably many right ways to do it and not many wrong ways to do it. So don't compare yourself. Just do what's right for your family. Take it a little step at a time. Consistency is key. It's a marathon here, not a sprint. And ultimately, if you want to do it, then make it happen. There's people out there that can help. There's so many resources. If someone who doesn't speak a word of Chinese can get the kids reasonably fluent, I'm sure you can do it as well.
You're inspiring so many people right now. Thank you, Emma. That's amazing. And I've been hearing that a lot of guests been sharing consistency and take little baby steps. And that's the key. And make it fun, right? Make it fun.
Definitely make it fun.
Go beyond learning. Yes, because learning a language it can take times, and it's not fun learning a new language, because when I came here to learn English, it was really tough. I mean, it's still tough right now, So we just have to make it fun and slow down.
I love what you're doing as well. Just sharing everybody's, because everybody has a different story. I think that's the thing. You can't just look at whether it's a blogger or your neighbor or someone who wrote a book and say, I want to do that, because that's not your family. It's not the context that you're in. It's not the resources that you have. And so it won't be you, and it's not going to work. So take lots of different ideas from people and stick with the ones that work for your family. And that's what you're helping do, seeing that it's very normal to learn in different ways. And you're, showing a light on it for all of us. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of your podcasts.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emma. All right. You have a good night. Sending you so... Yeah, awesome. Sending you so much love and thank you for coming on.
Thank you. It's been really fun.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you for listening. We have so many amazing guests that are coming on in the future episode. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Also, make sure you check our show notes. I will link Emma's information in the show notes. Also, check out our freebie and our number course will also be in the show notes. If you want to support us, make sure you leave a review. We would love to hear your feedback. Your support and love will keep us going and bring more guests and more amazing episodes to share to the world. Thank you for now. Bye-bye.